This is the Patriots Catch-22 podcast with Evan Lazar and Alex Barth.
I'm Evan Lazar. Evan Lazar.
Hello, everybody.
Nailed it. Joined as always by our Barth. That's a fit. That's a match.
No risk it, no biscuit.
22.
Here is Evan Lazar and Alex Barth.
When people want to show what an RPO is, how an RPO is supposed to work, they show elevator.
Yeah, so it's one of the gold standards of it for sure. And he said that was...
It is like the Titleist Pro V1
Yeah.
of RPO package.
I don't know what that means.
That's like the golf ball.
I have no idea what he's talking about.
It's like $3 a ball.
Okay. Is that expensive?
Yes.
Okay. Is that expensive? No idea.
22.
The Titleist what?
Pro V1.
Is that... Does Tiger Woods use that ball?
No, he's not a Titleist guy. He's a Nike guy.
Okay,
But-
so then it's not the best golf ball.
No, it is. It
No,
is. Well,
that-
also,
it's
Nike
not.
doesn't make golf balls anymore.
That's like saying, like, what kind of helmet did Tom Brady wear?
The Riddell VSR1.
That's the best helmet then.
But they don't make it anymore.
The greatest quarterback of all time wore that helmet. Anyways, Evan Lazar, Alex Barth with you for the next hour and 30 minutes here on Patriots Catch-22. We finally, thank God, have something tangible. I don't care, and look, I'm going to go on a mini rant about this for a second, Alex, because we posted a clip of Mac Jones throwing a bomb to Taekwon Thornton yesterday at practice, and there's so many people that are like, oh, it's against air, and there's no pass for. I don't care. All right, we all want football. We're starving for it. Everybody wants to talk about some football. We finally got some actual tangible things to discuss, to take it off the piece of paper that it is currently on the depth chart that hangs at all of our desks, and actually put some bodies on a football field and run around for 2 hours, okay? So, yes, is for all the Maurice Harrises and the Trey Nixons and all of those of the world, these practices probably don't mean a ton between what's going to happen come this fall. Are the Patriots going to win 12 games because Taekwon Thornton caught a bomb from Mac Jones in spring practice? Of course not. And we are fully aware of that. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to have reactions, have opinions, and even maybe some overreactions to some of the things we saw. And
You can overreact.
I have a few things that I want to overreact about, and I'm fully admitting that I'm overreacting about them. But where I want to start, and I think this is where everybody's starting, and for good reason, is overall with the offense, with what we saw out there from Bill O'Brien's group, and of course with the quarterback and Mac Jones, and not only what we saw at practice, but maybe also what we heard from him after practice as well. And I think the most telling answer, and the really what I felt too, and I'm sure what you felt as well, Alex, and Mac kind of summed it up for us all: normal.
Yeah.
Normal. Like, and that being just what it is a sigh of relief, I think, for all Patriots fans. And as I wrote yesterday, for spring practice, for organized team activities, OTAs, you at least saw and heard the things that you wanted to see and hear. Like, that was all it was. We're not planning the parade route. We're not getting our tickets booked for the Super Bowl. Or is it Vegas this year, right?
Sounds right.
Yeah, something like
You're
that.
not going to book a ticket to Vegas? You love Vegas.
I'm not booking any tickets.
But you love Vegas.
To the Super Bowl. It looked like a professional football team practicing offense. And that right there is a breath of fresh air, whether you want to take that and run with it or not. And then we can get into some of the details about what they were actually doing, as much as we can tell you guys.
Right.
But what was your big takeaway from yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, along those lines, they didn't have to stop practice because they couldn't get the right personnel on the field. They didn't have to stop practice because guys weren't lining up in the right spot. They didn't have to stop practice because guys were false starting or whatever.
Right.
I think there was only one lap run yesterday, I believe, was Miles Bryant on a muff punt.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like Max said, normal. And then I thought the other telling part of that quote, he keeps going when he was asked what it's been like to work with Bill O'Brien. He says, I think the communication is the most important part, and trust when working with a new coach. So it's a normal staff that he trusts.
Yeah.
That's refreshing.
Yeah.
And it's hard not to look at that and not look at it in a comparative nature based off what they went through last year.
Yeah, and there's just a couple of things from a football perspective. Obviously, what Mac Jones said after practice, I thought summed it up nicely. The optimism that you can take away from this practice. I think the other things, there weren't a whole lot of balls on the ground. Like that, and that's a good sign, right? When
They kept that thing moving.
Yeah, the ball is not on the ground. You're not seeing that how many times last year I can count. It takes more than two hands to count how many times in a practice we would see Mac Jones or even Bailey Zappi holding the football in the pocket, like just like holding it, looking around, like what the heck am I supposed to do with this thing? How many times were there like coverage sacks or throwaways? Like that type of stuff should not happen in practice. That type of stuff shouldn't reflect in a practice setting that is scripted, and that you're supposed to just be running through your base plays, and you can't even get your base plays to work in the summertime is concerning. That was not anything what happened yesterday. And then schematically, I was intrigued by what was going on, and once you sort of piece together some of the things that they were doing, it felt like they were installing, as they do this time of year, like the foundational elements of things that you can then clearly see what the plan is to then build off of those foundational elements. Like they spent an entire period offensively drilling screens, right? Wide receiver screens, running back screens, and they had all these different screen game concepts working in. And you could see how, okay, maybe we fake the screen and then we go down the field. Maybe we RPO out of this. Maybe it's a run action paired with the screen, in an RPO sense. Like there's different things that you can then go ahead and build off of those concepts. There was some play action. Some under center play action periods, or we had more like 2-man route combos, I would say, down the field than anything. But there was a lot of that going on. There was a lot of motion going on as well, which I think really stood out. Not just motioning to a receiver, motioning to kind of go into the pattern in the other direction, but also motioning blockers and moving blockers around, which I think is a good sign. Those types of things are just kind of that next PhD level of football that we're starting to see. Formation changes, alignment shifts, stacks, bunches, different receiver splits, like moving guys around like that and using their different skill sets to the best of their ability. They were already doing that, and I think that's encouraging as well. So they've been putting in some work. You can tell that this offense got in here mid-April. Like, yes, they didn't get on the field with coaches until last week, but those meetings, you still can accomplish a lot by going through the playbook and putting up examples and walking through things and talking through things, and you can tell that this group is already coming together even in May, which is that's all you want to hear. That's all you want to see. That's all you want to hear. The results then hopefully come from there. Like, I don't want to overreact too much to the actual play result, like what Taekwon Thornton catching a bomb. Like, I don't want to overreact too much about that. It's more about the confidence, the synchronicity of everything, the efficiency of it all. Those are the types of things that you look for in a spring practice.
Yeah, you just look at it compared to last year and how much further along they look at this point compared to last year. I think that's what we're talking about here. And I'm not going to get super excited, and I don't necessarily put any stake into the result of the plays this time of year. You don't have the full team. Nobody's in pads. Nobody's going 100%. They ran one high impact period the whole practice. I think they did a little live-ish 2-minute thing, which I want to get to a little bit. But like you said, everybody feels like they're on, and Max said, everybody's on the same page, which we didn't really hear them say that last year, was we're trying to get on the same page at this time last year, and even beyond this point last year.
I just think that it must be such a good change for the players that there's no questioning like who's in charge, right? Like offensively, defensively, but we're talking about the offense, and for good reason. Like, everybody knows offensively that this is Bill O'Brien's show.
Well, remember when we were talking about when we were going through like who should they hire as the offensive coordinator, and that phrase kept coming up. Josh McDaniels wasn't just the offensive coordinator, he was the head coach of the offense. And we kept kind of going back to that thing. Bill O'Brien yesterday looked like the head coach of the offense, right? And Bill Belichick's back with the defense and all of that, and the process looked much more streamlined.
Last thing about sort of the overall practice and the process, and then we're going to get into specific positions and players and kind of go position by position here on the different guys that we saw or stood out to us. I thought it was really telling that during a lot of the team drill periods of practice, they weren't coaching in between plays, and the coaches weren't on the field. They were on the sideline. And at a lot of these practices, what you'll see is after every single play, there's like a pause because somebody's making a correction, right? Or there's a coaching point that needs to be addressed. And in these, then we get into training camp, and especially once we get into like joint practices and things like that, there's full periods of 11 on 11, and this wasn't quite that, but there's full periods of 11 on 11 where it's almost like a game. Like the coaches call plays from the sideline like they would in a game, and there's no in between coaching elements, right? It's all just, let's just roll the ball out and let's see what it looks like, because we got to get to a point where the coaches are not going to be able to make a correction after every single play when it's live on a Sunday, right? So at some point we got to just let the players play, and they were already doing a little bit of that, which tells me that mentally they feel good enough about that, they know what they're running and they know what they're doing, that they don't have to then go ahead and you cut your route off here and we want you to do it here and we wanted you to do this and we want you, they don't have to do all of that necessarily as much. Last year it felt like there was a ton of that, where it was every single time something didn't look right, they had to hold up practice, make a correction, get everybody to, like, how many times did they like re-huddle, right? And like get everybody together and organize the troops again. And this practice had none of that. So really all good stuff from the Patriots offense. Defensively, I never looked too much into these practices because you can't hit anybody. So like what are you really going to do defensively all that much? We'll get into some of the things that stood out on both sides of the football. We'll get to Alex's specialist hour as well. We'll get his take on the rookies in the punter and the kicker. Ryland, I thought, was okay.
He was fine. We didn't see it. They did one field goal period. It was like half speed. So.
Behringer, I thought he's got a Behringer. That thing, that ball does pop off.
Is it Behringer or Behringer?
Deuce said it's Behringer.
Okay, so I thought it was Behringer, but I'd go to Behringer. Okay, he if there's a position battle that can be won in the spring, it's kicker punter, and I would say after one practice, Behringer has a lead on Corliss Waitman. Okay,
there you go. So let's get into some position by position stuff. Now that we did the big picture, we'll also take your calls, 855-PATS-500. We already got a bunch of calls, so we're going to do a couple positions, and we'll get to the calls, then we'll finish up the positions. But let's start with quarterback, and we did touch briefly on some of the Mac Jones of it all and all that type of stuff. I know there was a little bit made to do with the order. It's kind of like, for some periods it was Mac Jones, then Trace McSorley, and then Bailey Zappi, and because Bailey Zappi was getting in with some regulars, like not getting in necessarily with backups. But I did notice that David Andrews, Cole Strait, like it was kind of Mac, right? Like for the most part with those guys. Now, with that being said, like how did you feel they were out there, not necessarily again like about every throw dissecting it, but just in terms of how they carried themselves, how they read things, how they saw things?
Yeah, I think with Mac Jones specifically, and first off, just based off what we saw yesterday, if there is a quarterback competition here, it's Mac's job to lose to an extreme amount.
That's, I think, the best way to put it is that I wouldn't say that the door is 100% shut on a quarterback competition quite yet. It was one practice, so I can't.
But it's not 2020 Cam Newton, Jarrett Stidham going back and forth.
Not even close.
Not anywhere close to that.
Yeah.
So I thought when it comes to Mac and his like body
language.
Body language. Thank you.
Yeah.
Body language and just the way he's carrying himself both on the field and talking to us after. His rookie year, I felt like he had this mentality of, I'm here to throw footballs and chew bubblegum, and I'm all out of bubblegum. Like he was just, I'm here to sling it, right?
Yeah.
And whatever happens, but I'm going to go out there, I'm going to do what I do, and I just won a national championship. I'm Mac Jones. I'm going to go have fun with it.
Yeah.
Last year, even like early on in camp, it just felt like the weight of everything was on his shoulders. It felt like he felt responsible for everything that was wrong with the offense, which was not the case. And I don't necessarily fault him for feeling that way.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of how you want your quarterback to feel. But I think a lot of that fun came out of it for him last year, because he was really just had to kind of try to drag that thing, him and David Andrews. And this year, I think it felt a lot more like he did as a rookie, with just, I'm just out here slinging the ball, man.
Yeah.
We're just out here, playing football, having fun, all that, and being a football nerd like he called himself, right? So that was super encouraging to see because
We're football nerds. We're cut from the same cloth.
Yeah, exactly. Me, us two, Mac Jones, Juju Smith-Schuster, all football nerds.
We're all gonna hang out after this.
Yeah, I think he's just getting to be Mac Jones again. I don't think he got to be Mac Jones last year, and I think that was tough. I think he's being Mac Jones again. I mean that in a good way. And how will that translate physically? That remains to be seen, but it feels like mentally he's in a much better spot than he was at this time last year.
Yeah, I think mentally being at a much better spot is a good way of putting it, even from a football perspective. I thought the practice in his play within the practice looked a lot more in rhythm and sort of just the ball was coming out on time. The eyes were going to the right places for the most part from what we could tell. And there wasn't a whole lot of indecisiveness or pause to his game. I thought that when it really started to go off the rails last year from Mac, you saw a ton of indecisiveness. That hesitation. Even when he was completing passes, there was just that hesitation of it wasn't coming out right when you would expect it to. It was maybe like a half a beat after that, and that was because he just wasn't 100% sure. And I think a lot of that came from early on in the year last year too, when he threw all the interceptions in the first month of the year. He was trying to be so careful about the ball, and like you said, you have to be calculated, but you also have to have a little bit of that gunslinger mentality.
Well, I wonder, too, if that came because the coaching staff changed the entire offense. I wonder how much of that was he's getting mixed messages from the coaching staff of we're going to throw the ball deep, but don't turn the ball over because you can't really emphasize both.
Yeah.
You mentioned, though, the like how decisive he was. I think I watched every single one of his throws in competitive drills yesterday. There was I don't know, what was it, like 20, 25, 30 throws, something like that. There was only one play where I was like, all right, Mac, make a decision. Let's go get rid of the ball. He's kind of rolling around a little bit in the pocket there. But it's going to happen once or twice. Like, that's just the reality of it. And we'll get to the defense in a little bit, but some of the defensive looks they were throwing out there were not last week of May looks. Those were,
never is with this team.
November, December kind of looks. So for the most part, I thought Mac did a very good job yesterday of just got to the back foot, knew where he wanted to go with the football, did it. He wasn't overthinking. That's not to say he was reckless, but there was very little overthinking, I thought, from him yesterday.
Yeah, those are all good signs. And, with Bailey Zappi, honestly, I think that I mean this with all due respect to Bailey Zappi. It's not a knock on him or a shot at him. I almost forgot that he was at the practice for a little while, which I think is a good thing. Like, when Tom Brady was here, I did not remember that Brian Hoyer was also taking part in the same practice, and I think that speaks to sort of the competition of it all. Like a true competition, that the backup is mixing in, right? Like he's involved. I didn't really feel the same way yesterday with Bailey Zappi. Trace McSorley, yikes! Not a great practice for him. I think he threw 3 picks in practice.
Sounds about right,
maybe even 4. When you're throwing picks like that in 7-on-7 in the spring, not that we thought Trace McSorley was going to make this team or push to start for this team or anything like that, but that brings us to the final guy that maybe isn't a quarterback after all. And
talk about. You said yesterday you were very effusive. You weren't going to talk about it.
I said I wasn't going to talk about it.
Talk about it, Evan.
Talk about it.
Talk about it.
That's what we do here. We talk about everybody.
And because it's a fun storyline.
Stop. Malik Cunningham, not in a red non-contact quarterback jersey, in a white jersey, playing a decent amount of receiver, and then
decent, like pretty much
exclusively until the very, very end when they ran basic with the rookies. He was playing quarterback. I'm going to say something nice about Malik Cunningham.
You should.
Not about him as a receiver. Not taking that seriously yet. But I would much rather see Malik Cunningham than Trace McSorley.
That's not saying something nice about Malik Cunningham. That's just being mean to Trace McSorley.
Stop wasting my time. All right, no offense, Trace McSorley, but it got really rough. It got rough to the point where it was hard to evaluate the other players that were on the field.
That's not nice about Malik Cunningham. That's just digging at Trace McSorley.
Please let Malik Cunningham play the third quarterback, please.
No, bring in an actual third quarterback that's like a veteran and has been around this league and can help some of the younger guys grow, like a Brian Hoyer. That's what that role should be, not Trace McSorley.
I got a little jazzed, and we're gonna, I'm segueing here to receivers, obviously.
No. I'm gonna give my Malik Cunningham take. Okay,
you can. I got a little bit jazzed about Taekwon yesterday for good reason, because Taekwon Thornton was the 50th overall pick in the draft last year. Taekwon Thornton had a very, very good last season and a pretty decent career at Baylor. Taekwon Thornton ran a 4.28 at the NFL Combine. Taekwon Thornton is a real receiver with real talent. That's why I just can't get any sort. I'm just not moving the needle at all on Malik Cunningham.
I think
at all.
you have
give your take.
You have this really skewed idea of what Malik Cunningham is here for and what fans think of him.
No.
Nobody is saying Malik Cunningham is competing with Taekwon Thornton. Nobody is saying that.
Nobody is saying that. But do you know how many people are saying, well, what about Julian Edelman? Like, remember Julian Edelman?
Okay, that is too far.
Remember Julian Edelman?
That is too far. And first off, based on what they had Malik Cunningham doing yesterday, not a Julian Edelman type receiver. The kind of receiver it looks like they're going to try to develop him into.
Do you remember Julian Edelman? He played quarterback in college.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
Yeah.
Not a lot of people know that.
And then he played in the slot. So they're developing, it looks like, Malik Cunningham into a different kind of receiver. He did have the catch of the day.
No, he didn't.
He did.
No, he didn't.
He did. Deep post from Trey McSorley, threw it high because, of course, he did. And Malik Cunningham goes all the way up the ladder to get it because Malik Cunningham is
like the sixth floor, all the way up the
Malik
ladder.
Cunningham is an elite athlete.
He's a good athlete.
He's an elite athlete.
He's not an elite athlete. He ran like a mid 4.5.
He's an elite ball carrier. He's an elite ball carrier.
He's an instinctive elite in that regard in terms of ball carrying. But it's not like he ran a 4.3.
He has the speed and agility to play wide receiver in the NFL and the size, 6'1", 190. But he had the catch of the day.
He did have the catch of the day.
No, then who did? Then who did?
I would put Taekwon.
Which catch?
The one early on in practice. I would put that over it any day of the week.
He was wide open.
Because he ran behind the whole defense.
That's the route of the day. That's not the catch of the day. Those are two completely different things.
Okay.
And I will say, Cunningham, for the one catch, there were a number of times where he looked like it was his first time playing receiver. He stumbled through some routes.
You mean Malik, Julian Edelman, Cunningham
he stumbled through some routes.
Gangbusters?
There was one where on the sideline he had the ball hit him in the hands, and I think he was too worried about getting his feet down in bounds to complete the catch. And that will all come. Nobody
will it all come?
Realistic is sitting here, Evan, and saying Malik Cunningham is going to be a 500-yard receiver for the Patriots in 2023.
Not this year, but it took Edelman a few years, Alex.
So they have a project player. Big freaking deal. Why are you so upset about that? Why can't we follow a project player that's going to be a fun story throughout the summer? Which, by the way,
I am so upset about it?
Your Celtics are now out.
Stop it.
We need things to talk about. Cunningham's a fun story. I know we're not, but we're not because Malik. We're going to talk about Malik Cunningham instead because he's a fun story. The Patriots are in practice right now.
Patriots Catch-22, not Celtics Catch-10 or whatever.
I'm just saying. Malik Cunningham's a fun story. We can talk about him. Nobody's saying he's going to be a breakout receiver for them this year, but he's a fun project player they have, just like Johnny Lumpkin, just like a lot of other players on the roster.
Johnny Lumpkin's a big dude.
Johnny Lumpkin's huge.
He's a huge guy.
He is massive.
We'll get to that in a second. Here, first of all, my Malik Cunningham bit is trolling at this point. It is.
Stop.
I admit that it's half that. But second to that, I keep coming back to the same thing, and I say this to you all the time. I have no issues with having a project player, but it's twofold right now. One, did you just kind of notice that they don't really have that many receivers? They don't have that many receivers.
I've always felt they go into camp with too many receivers, and guys end up just sitting there. So I'm actually okay with how many because they're going to have.
Okay, but let's play this out for a second because Malik Cunningham was playing receiver yesterday. I am not entirely sure that, it's nice to give him a look there and see what he can do, and he's open to it and all that kind of stuff. I'm not entirely sure he would be playing receiver if they actually had more receivers to play, because the other guy that was also playing some receiver yesterday was Raleigh Webb.
Well, he's a receiver.
It was like early, in camp sometimes when Justin Bethel would have to play corner just because out of the numbers.
And then meanwhile, guys got hurt, and they put Justin Bethel in at corner, and he played well.
Okay, but let's hope that doesn't come to that with Raleigh Webb.
But this is the time. Look, if they're doing this in joint practices, I get where you're going. This is the time of year to try these things out.
Fine, and I'm totally fine with it. And this time of year, it's fine.
For what it's worth on the number,
I'm not taking it seriously. I
thought we were doing overreactions.
We are, and that's one thing I'm not overreacting to.
For what it's worth on the number of wide receivers, Kayshon Boutte was limited. Juju Smith-Schuster wasn't out there. So that's 2 more bodies they're going to have.
They only have 7 guys, I think, on the roster right now, even that are signed.
I'm trying to find
team.
last year's training camp roster. I think
they usually go in with like 8 or 9 at least, I want to say. So they don't have a ton of receivers. They just don't. And so Malik Cunningham and Raleigh Webb are getting reps in these practices as receivers as a result. And I'm just not looking too much into it. That's it. That's all I'm going to say about it. We'll see what happens. Maybe I'm totally wrong about Malik Cunningham. I'm not giving him enough credit, and he ends up being a player for the Patriots. But I'm just not there yet. And the thing that I always say to you when we argue about this even off the air, because that's what we do, is teams that have loaded receiving groups are not going into training camp worrying about Malik Cunningham. Right, like the Philadelphia Eagles are not going into training camp and thinking about, like this, UDFA that might be a quarterback, might be a no, they're not thinking about those guys. And if they are thinking about those guys, it's like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if this worked out?
But that's what we're doing with Malik Cunningham.
With Malik Cunningham, it's like it's almost like it needs to work out.
Why? Where is this take coming from? Why does he need to work out?
By
the way,
it bothers me.
They had, not including Slater in either one of these, they had 9 receivers last year in camp. They have 8 this year. So it's a 1-player difference.
I guess because Juju wasn't there.
Or no, sorry. It's 8 and 8 because this list I'm looking at last year has Ty Montgomery as a receiver.
Okay.
So it's 8 and 8. So it's the same number. Yesterday, they were shorthanded.
Yeah.
But Juju's going to be back. Keyshawn Boutte is going to get on the field. You talk about
let's move on from
one more because you talk about the Eagles and they're not doing this. They freaking love Tyree Jackson, who is a converted quarterback. They're trying to turn into a tight end.
They might freaking love him, but they don't.
They like the idea of him.
They have a guy named Dallas Goedert who's actually playing tight end for them. It just that's the whole thing. And I think
we know the Patriots don't have a number 1 receiver.
But it's the Jeff Thomas of it all. It's like every year we have to do this, right? Like I'll even say like to an extent that like Trey Nixon or Demario Douglas might like fit this category too. Every year we have to overhype some guy that like. His YouTube highlights are good, and like we're just gonna get all jazzed up about it. The guy that, and I want to segue because we talked too much about Malik Cunningham for my liking. The guy that I think that we should legitimately be bullish on is Taekwon. Like Taekwon, to me, has a real chance to break out, and I've had this take all along, and it's not like a hot take or anything, but Taekwon's breakout or potential goes hand in hand with Mac Jones's breakout and potential, right? If Mac Jones is going to break out and throw for 30 touchdown passes this year and be the quarterback that takes that next step, he's going to need somebody to come along with him. Like he said yesterday, I'm going to run my race and hopefully everybody runs behind me. That was a Mac Jones quote from yesterday. Taekwon Thornton is the guy that if this offense is truly going to hit its ceiling and hit its utmost potential, it's going to have to be because Taekwon Thornton plays like a second-round pick.
Okay, but you just had that whole thing about, I don't want to sit here and hype up the guy who has the pretty highlight tape, and now we're going to overreact to Taekwon Thornton, who I'm not saying Taekwon Thornton can't be good.
He's a real receiver.
We know he's faster than everybody else on the field. We've known that since they drafted him.
I don't care.
What else did we see yesterday, Evan?
I think we saw some route detail that he didn't put on the tape last
You're
year.
reacting to the highlight tape. This is the kind of guy, he breaks out in minicamp because he's faster than everybody else. Oh, wow, he must be good. This is the exact kind of guy you're saying you don't want to focus on.
No, I'm not saying that because I think that Taekwon, we knew that he had that baseline of speed. I think what we saw yesterday was a little bit more of an ability to vary speeds, change speeds, and like use that superpower. Like he knows that he has the threat of taking off on every single play.
Yeah.
And every corner he goes up against is going to have to respect the fact that this guy can take the top off.
But that changes once guys can hit him at the line and once guys can hit him at the top
I agree,
of his route.
Although he did have a really nice release against Jack Jones. Maybe it's because Jack Jones can't really use his hands yet.
That's
but
what I'm saying.
The lateral movement was there.
I'm not willing to go there with Taekwon Thornton yet.
That's okay.
I'm not willing to go there with him yet.
I'm not willing to go there to the extent of like I'm going to say that Taekwon Thornton's going to have 1,000 yards. He's going to totally break out. I'm a little bit more bullish on somebody else that we'll get to down the line here than that. But with Taekwon, the things that I saw from him, from the details of his routes, like I just thought it was crisper. I thought he was coming in and out of the break crisper. I thought it was more efficient. I think last year there was a lot of wasted movement in his route running, both at the line of scrimmage and at the top of the route. And I think this is really where Bill O'Brien can help him at the line of scrimmage, is getting him off the line, like bringing him in motion, using him a little bit more in the slot, using him off the line of scrimmage in a bunch or a stack, where he doesn't have to, put a move on a guy and press and then get up the field and then get into the, all that type of stuff I think really slowed him down last year. And this year I think that what he showed me yesterday is he knows his superpower, right? Yeah. And we can now build off of the superpower of the speed, which is key. And two, I think that there was a little bit more efficiency to his movements. I don't think that there was quite as much jibber jabber, happy feet, throwing fakes, throwing bobbing and weaving. It was just kind of get up to a good speed with that acceleration, get guys on their heels, and then break off of it. He caught that out route that he caught, just undressed the corner. Now, as a practice squad corner, I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh my God, this is, him going up against Jalen Ramsey and the Miami Dolphins or whatever, Darius Slay week 1 against Philadelphia. But that ability to get up the field, get the corner on his heels, and then break it off, those are the types of routes that are going to make him a higher volume guy. You can't just throw deep shots to him all day long. He's got to build something else off of that. And it's going to be the underneath stuff. It's going to be getting guys to open up there and get on their horse and then breaking it down and then losing them at the top of the route. He caught a slant coming over the middle of the field. Yeah. That probably would have been a big play. Those are the types of routes that get me a little bit excited.
I just want to see it when he's going against guys that can hit him.
It's fair. And I am willing to wait as well before I get really excited about Taekwon Thornton. But it was good. Yesterday was the best practice I've seen him have in any setting, whether it was OTAs last year, mini camp last year, training camp last year. He had one catch every couple practices where you're like, oh, there it is, right? Yesterday he was consistently open the entire practice. And that's exciting. It should be exciting. You're allowed to be excited about it. The other receivers, Devontae Parker, didn't really do much. He caught that one screen that I think he might have housed in a game, but it wasn't really, we'll see what happens in real life. Kendrick Bourne was more involved, but again, I think almost out of necessity to a degree. So I'm not ready to...
Well, the question's going to be when Juju comes back, who's the odd man out, because it was a pretty regular rotation at receiver yesterday without him.
Yeah, and he did drop a pass up the seam, which wasn't great. But other than that, I thought Kendrick Bourne was back involved, and maybe that...
I mean, if we want to talk about usage, if you're going to hype up Taekwon Thornton,
yep.
I thought the kind of routes they had Kendrick Bourne running were a lot more like what he was running in 2021. Yeah. I thought they had him playing a lot more to his skill set. I know you aren't necessarily counting on a bounce-back year for Kendrick Bourne. I kind of am, and I think they're going to try to really tap into what worked for him in 2021 compared to what they had him doing last year.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest thing, and I think that's a good way of putting it with all of the receivers. And you can throw Demario Douglas, who I think is important to put the context in that he was doing it mostly with backups, right? He wasn't cracking the top rotation is my point. With that being said, everybody seemed to be doing things that made sense.
Yeah.
Right? Kendrick Bourne was running routes that made sense for him. Taekwon was running routes that made sense for him. And then Demario Douglas was running out of the slot, catching passes underneath the defense, doing some things like gadget type things as well. All of it, you could see that they have plans and they have visions for how to use all these players.
Right.
And we're already at to a point where it's almost like they're already calling plays for that vision, right? And designing plays for that vision. And that's kind of what you get with Bill O'Brien. So that's the quarterbacks. That's the receivers. Let's talk about running backs, and then we'll take some of these phone calls. Ty Montgomery. Ty Montgomery is the best practice player that on this team sometimes. It's kind of crazy. He has done nothing in the NFL for 2 years, in an actual NFL game. So maybe he is the peak Maurice Harris, right? Maybe he is peak practice player.
But no, Montgomery's been hurt.
Yeah.
He's proven himself in the NFL before.
Yeah. He's not a game changer out of the backfield. He's not James White. He's not even Shane Vereen, right? He's not a real game breaker out of that spot. But it just seems like whenever the quarterback needs to dump the football off and he's involved in the practice, when they look for him, he's where he's supposed to be. He catches the football, and then he gets up the field and is going to give you at least a little something after the catch potentially as well. But it's like he's a safety blanket. It's the reliability. Like, he always seems to be where he's supposed to be at. He catches the football, and it doesn't look all that difficult for him. So once again, here we are in the middle of the summertime or the spring, and we're talking about Ty Montgomery potentially having a role on this football team. I think that's valid. I think that there's definitely a path. Again, I think he looks like the most natural receiving back on the team, even more so than some of the younger guys. Yeah.
Again, it's going to be interesting to see how that all shakes out. I thought, just while we're on the running backs, I thought Pierre Strong and Kevin Harris got some good reps yesterday.
Kevin Harris looks a little lighter.
He does.
Looks a little more spry out there.
But I think the both of them, you talk about the high impact reps, and we kind of talked about this with Mac Jones in the quarterback competition. I thought the two of them got some high impact reps, which was good to see. I don't think they're going to sort this thing out behind Ramondre, and whether it's 4 guys for 2 spots, 4 guys for 3 spots between Montgomery, Robinson, Strong, and Harris, like, that part's not clear yet, but it's going to be some combination of those 4 fighting for 2 or 3 spots, and I think it's going to be one hell of a competition. I think it's going to be close because, like you said, I thought Montgomery, he looked great yesterday, and he looks healthy, and he looks ready to go. I thought Harris and Strong both had a solid practice. I thought they rotated all 4 relatively equally. If there's one guy we saw a little less of, it was James Robinson.
Yeah.
But sometimes they go practice to practice. Sometimes it's, hey, this was a Ty Montgomery practice, and next week will be a James Robinson practice, and so it's just one practice. We can't go there yet, but it's interesting that it seems like all 4 guys are really in the mix. Even J.J. Taylor got some good run yesterday.
Yeah,
but I still think he's on the outside.
They're showing the wide right for the Bills, and it just never gets old watching the Bills lose. Yeah. Anyways, I just feel like Ty Montgomery he just always seems to look the most at home in that role. Like, they've tried, I think they are still trying to work with Pierre Strong, to get to that point. I think they're still trying. Maybe there's a little bit more out of Kevin Harris than they expected as a receiver. I did not expect Kevin Harris when he came into the league to catch very many passes at all.
Right.
Maybe he can do a little bit more than that. I think James Robinson still has a chance to do some of those types of things, but it always keeps coming back to Ty Montgomery. Whenever he's out there, he just looks like a good fit there. All right, let's take some of these calls, and we'll get to the rest of the roster here. Chris is in Fresno. Thanks for hanging on, Chris. What's up?
How's it going, guys? I have a quick question real fast. I actually have 2 questions. So, based off what you saw yesterday, do you think that we still need to choose number one wide receiver, like Hopkins, or do you think that we're good with the group that we have now? And then my second question is, how did Mike Gesicki look yesterday? Was he playing more tight end, more receiver? Not sure you guys can report on, but thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris. And yeah, that's a good segue because tight ends was the next stop along this track here.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
No, let's talk about the receiver question, though, quickly. It's hard to tell because they didn't have Juju out there yet, so we don't know exactly how it's all going to fit together. But I think what really came to fruition yesterday and sort of the vision, if you just assume it's going to be Juju probably in the role that Kendrick Bourne was playing yesterday, with Taekwon in the role he was playing, and then Devontae Parker. And really, DeAndre Hopkins is kind of the only guy out there. We know he's the name right now.
Well, so the one thing I was going to add is Diana Rossini just reported the Patriots are interested for what, and there's been 4 or 5 reports over the last couple of days that have said that. Where'd the full one go here? Patriots are interested. The Bills have had conversations, but are not all in on Hopkins, whatever that means. Oh, that's one of the teams that we thought, in that the Cowboys and Jets are not interested.
Okay, so the real question, and look, maybe there's still a number one receiver that comes out of nowhere that's available, but this time of year, we've ship has sort of sailed, right? Jerry Jeudy's not all of a sudden going to get traded at this point or something like that. So Hopkins, and not that this has changed based off of yesterday at all, but what you're really talking about is Hopkins taking over Devontae Parker's spot, right? And I still think that that's 150% worth it for the Patriots, and I'll add to that, and we talked a little bit about this on PU on Tuesday, I think, but I'll add to that the Patriots should absolutely do everything in their power to get DeAndre Hopkins on this football team. Like, there's money that should not be an object. They should be giving him what he wants. They should be backing up the Brinks truck, because in a lot of ways, even if it's just off of reputation, even if he's not the same guy that he used to be, but just having him out there just makes opposing defenses think about the pecking order a little bit differently at wide receiver. It just opens up so much for everybody else. So even if he's just running Devontae Parker's routes in the X receiver spot and doing exactly what Devontae Parker did last year, I still think that there's something to be said for this is DeAndre freaking Hopkins, right? Like this is a different animal than Devontae Parker.
This goes back to what you were complaining about with Malik Cunningham.
Yeah.
Why do we keep having to manufacture these wide receiver ones and guys like Malik Cunningham? Well, so if they get DeAndre Parker, can we talk about Malik Cunningham then without you throwing a fit?
Maybe.
I think that's a fair bet. I think that's a very
they get Hopkins, and again, and
maybe DeAndre Hopkins teaches Malik Cunningham to be elite.
I will say this matter of factly: the Patriots should be doing everything in their power to get DeAndre Hopkins to New England. Like this doesn't happen too often in the NFL. And Alex, you can speak to this. That on June 1st. A player for free, not via trade,
right?
For free.
Well, money, but
no
picks. No picks.
Thank you for the Mr. Kraft for everything. Yeah. It's your money. It's not mine, right? For free.
Spoken like a true team employee.
The player you can get of that caliber this time of year is rare.
Yeah. And let me interject there because I hear people say this all the time. I'm literally seeing it pop up in the chat on Facebook as we speak. That word, washed.
Yeah.
Oh, he's washed. And look, on one hand, I get it. He's going into his age 31 season.
Yep.
The 30 mark is generally a pretty strong line of demarcation for wide receivers. There's very few wide receivers that produce after 30. But a couple things on that. First off, I don't want to say DeAndre Hopkins is slow because he's not slow.
He's never been a burner, though.
If we were to list NFL burners, it would be a while before we got to DeAndre Hopkins, right?
It's never been his
He
game.
wins on route running. He wins on body control. Obviously, he's got tremendous hands, right? Catch radius, all of that.
Right.
Everybody, when I do that explanation, people always go, what about hands? I like to save the best for last, okay? Outstanding hands, outstanding catch radius. Those things don't go away with age the way speed does.
Yeah.
His game translates better without speed. Like you see guys who are really fast and then they lose a step or two and suddenly they're not the same player. I'd compare it to in baseball, right? The pitchers who are great because they throw 101, they can't necessarily spot the ball, but they're throwing it so hard it doesn't matter. All of a sudden 101 becomes 96 and they're just throwing batting practice versus a guy who has thrown 89 his whole career, and it's not impressive, but he can put it right on the black every single time, and it's got nasty movement. Those are the guys that pitch into their late 30s, early 40s compared to these fireballers that are generally out of the league.
So what you're saying is that DeAndre Hopkins is the 89-mile-an-hour control guy.
DeAndre Hopkins is more Nolan Ryan than he is like Madison Bumgarner. Right? Okay. Madison Bumgarner was throwing gas, and then he wasn't throwing gas, and he really wasn't that good anymore. I'm trying to think of a guy. There's less of these guys now because everybody wants to throw 100.
So I don't know. I'm just going to use this, and baseball's not my thing, but we're running with this analogy. Greg Maddux, right?
Greg Maddux would be a great example.
Greg Maddux was always the control guy.
Verlander.
Yeah.
Justin Verlander never threw that hard, but he's still going great because he can pinpoint it, and it's so anyway. It's enough baseball talk for the show.
Yeah.
The other thing,
baseball season. So
the other thing I want to bring up on Hopkins that kind of backs this up, and you're going to say, "Oh, you're just saying that," blah blah blah. But it will fade. He's old. I know you hate pace talk, right? 17-game pace.
No, but last year he on a per game basis, DeAndre Hopkins is still a top 10 receiver in the league.
Not just top 10. So first of all, he was 9th in quarterback rating when targeted. And the reason I like that stat is who were the Cardinals quarterbacks last year? Who was playing? Nobody good. One of them was Trace McSorley, actually.
He's never played with a good quarterback.
So we're on the same boat about Kyler. I didn't want to start a whole thing about Kyler, but
let's not start.
Okay, DeAndre Hopkins he played 9 games last year, about half the season. Had he played 17, Evan, you tell me if a guy with these numbers you're interested in bringing in.
Is this something you might be interested in?
121 yards. 121 catches. 121 catches. 1,354 yards, 6 touchdowns.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is this
is a 1,300-yard receiver.
Yeah, I know. This is the pushback that I don't really understand. I think, and not taking any shots at, I think it was Albert Breer that had those NFL execs say about DeAndre Hopkins that he can't run anymore, something like that. And that was just never his game, but also the numbers were the numbers last year. You're lying, right? You're lying when you're saying that. You're being disingenuous. A guy can't put up 1,300 yards in the NFL without being able to get open still.
Can I throw up one more number? Actually, I just found this because I know Patriots fans are petrified of Jalen Ramsey, who, by the way, I think that acquisition from Miami is totally overblown. I was out on Jalen Ramsey. I don't think he's the player he once was.
Yeah.
If you're a Patriots fan, you're petrified of Jalen Ramsey on the Dolphins. Here's what DeAndre Hopkins did against the Rams last year. 10 catches, 98 yards.
Yeah, no, he can
still play.
Yeah, he can still play, and you still think he comes in here and is your best receiver, and that's what the Patriots should be looking for. Tight ends, though, that's our DeAndre Hopkins bit right there. I think both of us are on board with throw whatever type of money bag you need to throw at that guy to get him to New England and recruit him, bring him to Nantucket, Bill. Get him on the payroll. Let's do it. Tight ends. I thought that there were two plays that stood out from the tight ends. First of all, we mentioned Johnny Lumpkin a little bit earlier. That is a massive human. I thought he was a tackle. I really did. I thought because he's wearing 65 because he's in the rookie number right now, and he looks the part of a 65. So he's a big dude. I think that's intriguing. There was one play where Mike Gesicki just crossed over the middle of the field and caught a crossing pattern, hit him in stride, turned up a little bit, and I was like, well, there's Mike Gesicki, right? Like, that's why he's here. He's here to horizontally stretch the field, vertically stretch the field from inside the formation as a tight end / slot receiver, big jumbo slot, whatever you want to call it. And then there was a corner route to Hunter Henry along the right sideline. That was vintage Hunter Henry, right? It was a clear out, vertical, flat, corner, 3-level flood. Hits him right in the honey hole there on the sideline, and I was like, well, that's vintage Hunter Henry. So there's a lot out there about both of those guys playing together and the two tight ends being back, 2011 Patriots, Bill O'Brien, whatever. I don't know if we can look too much into all that just yet. It's one practice, but certainly what I saw from Mike Gesicki I liked. He's a little bit of a different body type. He's certainly more leaner, more athletic. You can see that wide receiver kind of comp there with the body type. And like I said, that crossing route, when Mac hit him on that, shallow intermediate level, it's kind of like an 8-yard cross, I was like, well, that's why he's here. That's what he's going to do.
Yeah, I would say the best way to describe what we saw from him yesterday, he was as advertised. And I mean that as a positive. He's lining up all over the formation, like you said, moves more like a wide receiver than a tight end. He's another guy that probably benefits from non-padded practices, but I liked what I saw from him.
Yeah, there was also one play when they were doing that screen period. We actually threw a pretty good block, all things considered. We're
not going to break down blocks in a non-padded practice.
I just did. No, the reason why I brought it up, though, is because as much as he's not somebody that I think is going to be a difference maker as an inline tight end with his hand in the dirt, if they're going to run a lot of these bubbles and screen attachments off the RPOs, that's a different type of block.
That's fair.
That's a out on the perimeter style block, where I still think on those blocks it's more about just throwing your size around at that point. And if you can be 6'6" and 250 pounds and at least just get in the way of somebody to get Taekwon Thornton loose, or to get Marcus Jones if he's playing offense loose, or whatever the case may be, that's a lot different than asking you to block a outside linebacker or defensive end with your hand in the dirt like you're a tackle. That's a much different skill. You're talking about blocking DBs, safeties, corners, things like that. So that's your tight ends. I thought, like you said, both guys just nothing to write home about necessarily, but nothing to panic about either. Just exactly what we kind of expected from both those dudes. Ferksker wasn't super involved, I didn't think yet, but he was out there a little bit. But Lumpkin really stood out in terms of aesthetic and coming off the bus with a guy like Johnny Lumpkin. He definitely looks that part. All right,
I'm going to be excited to see him when the pads come on. Yeah. That's going to be when we start talking about Johnny.
I think he has a real shot as that third in line run blocking, 4th and 1. Probably would rather Johnny Lumpkin out there than Hunter Henry or Gesicki. It's possible. It's possible that he could be in that role. All right. Sean in Vancouver. What's up, Sean?
I have 3 questions, are short. One thing I wanted to know, you mentioned a lot about the play or just what the action looks like for Thornton. I wonder about the physicality, though. Does he look a little heavier, or could you not tell?
I wouldn't say that he looked noticeably heavier. He did mention that that was something that was obviously an emphasis for him. But I would also be, I think I'm maybe not on the same page as everybody else as much on this. I don't know how you feel about it, Alex. I don't want Taekwon Thornton being too heavy.
It's a dangerous game you play.
Yeah.
He's got to put on a little muscle, certainly, but you don't want him slowing down.
And his frame is kind of his frame.
Right.
When you stand across from him, Sean, like, this is not a guy that is like, oh, he just needs to fill out, right? Like, he's got a smaller frame. He's got a slighter frame. It's just kind of his build. What else you got?
Trace McSorley, just to put this out there in case anyone's wondering, I looked this up. No relation to Marty, in case anyone's wondering. Okay. And the last question I have, you sort of mentioned this, and I'm guessing that you're not going to know until pads come on, but you're high on Lumpkin. Does that mean that you think that Ferkser is not going to make the team?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks for the call, Sean. I don't know if it's necessarily... I think it is between those two guys. And I do think that they probably have a little bit of a different plan for both of them.
Yeah.
And so that's what's going to come down to ultimately is, I think, do they prioritize basically having a third tackle? You know, I brought up... who's the guy?
Michael Williams.
Michael Williams, thank you. I brought up Michael Williams. I don't know if Patriots fans all remember Michael Williams, but he's bigger than Hooman, so I wouldn't necessarily use Hooman as an example.
No, Michael Williams was literally converted tackle. He played...
It's the same thing.
Right. He played tight end in college at like 285 pounds, got to the NFL, bulked up to tackle with Detroit, and then he ended up with the Patriots, and they moved him back to tight end. They didn't really throw him the ball, but like he was out there. Teams had to account for him as a tight end, not as a tackle.
So the question is do they prioritize that of an inline blocking tight end who could potentially leak out and catch a pass on a 4th and 1 play action if they wanted to throw the defense a little bit of a curveball, or a Ferkser, who I think is really more of like a move tight end that can maybe play some H-back, play some fullback, play some slot, and be a little bit more versatile, but not necessarily be as physically imposing. I think that's going to come down to where they envision the offense going more than anything, like what the roles are and what they're trying to fill out on the depth chart but behind Hunter Henry and Gesicki.
Well, at the same time, too, I think both of those guys are probably guys you can get on the practice squad.
Yeah, Lumpkin certainly, unless he because he's not going to have the stats in the preseason.
Right.
Like, he's not going to catch 10 passes in a game or anything like that.
So at what point, is it they're just kind of bouncing them back and forth from the practice squad week to week based on matchups? I think Lumpkin has a better shot to make the week 1 roster because of that UDFA streak, but it could be, all right, Lumpkin's on week 1, and week 1 against the Eagles against that pass rush, maybe you want an extra blocker out there, and he makes sense. And then after week 1, it's like, all right, well, now Ferkser's a better matchup, and they switch him.
Yeah.
Like, that could totally happen, too.
Yep, absolutely. All right. What's up, Patty? How you doing?
What's up, guys? How are you today?
Hey, good.
Sorry, a little bit of noise. I'm working in my shop today, but so I think I got an answer on Joe Judge's pomposity. Now, hear me out. We heard Bill say yesterday during his press conference that he'd do anything that I ask him to do or anything I tell him to do. Now, did either of you guys see Forrest Gump?
Years ago.
Yeah, once upon a time.
There's a scene where he's in boot camp, and it's Army boot camp, so I'm not getting this wrong. His drill sergeant says, "Gump, what is your sole purpose in this Army?" He's like, "To do whatever you tell me." And he's like, "Damn it, that's the most outstanding answer I've ever heard. You must be a genius." So I think Joe Judge probably grew up hearing how stupid he was, throughout his life. And then Bill comes up and says and asks him the same question, and he gives the same answer. And he's like, "Wow, this guy actually thinks I'm pretty smart. He thinks I'm a genius." I'm joking, obviously. But, Evan, I got 2 words. Why we don't need DeAndre Hopkins.
Uh-oh.
You ready for it?
Maybe.
Malik Cunningham.
Yes!
That's all I got.
Yes!
It's a good call, Patty.
Good call.
It's a good call.
Good call.
I can't get mad. I can't get mad. But with Joe Judge, I don't want to go too deep on Joe Judge, but I don't know how you feel about it. It was pretty clear to me that he's the special teams coordinator. Like, I don't know what's going on with Cam McCord. I don't know if Cam McCord was out there with the special teams guys also in the special teams periods, but the voice you heard was Joe Judge, the guy that was barking out the orders and really running the show. in that phase of the game was Joe Judge. Is it possible that Cam McCord's gotten demoted? Is it possible that they're like co-special teams coordinators? Well, maybe we'll find out when the media guide comes out and the official coaching staff is announced. I don't know. I don't know what it's exactly going to look like on paper, but it was pretty apparent that Joe Judge is going to be heavily involved in the kicking game. Like not just helping out and giving his input and quality control stuff. No, he's like coaching the special teams right now.
Yeah, that's certainly what it looks like.
Yeah. All right. We had offensive line. Not much to glean from offensive line in a non-padded practice. Obviously, we're not going to break down performance and this guy looked good, that guy looked good. It's more about who was where and who wasn't, right? And without Trent Brown, without Mike Onwenu at the moment. So the only real solidified holdovers were David Andrews at center and Cole Strange at left guard. Like those two guys are going to be hip and hip for a long time, hopefully, right? And that's going to be the interior there. The rest of it was, I think, pretty. I'm going to use a phrase that apparently only I know, chalk. And that's Riley Reif and Calvin Anderson. Reif on the right side, Anderson on the left side. We did see a little bit of Connor McDermott, right? There's kind of those three guys rotating at tackle, and then a little bit of Bill Murray.
Yeah,
a little bit of Bill Murray. I'm not going to look too much into that just because the rookies haven't been around long enough to they're just trying to run a practice.
And Chasen Hines wasn't there either.
Yeah.
Chasen Hines wasn't in practice in addition. And we know Mike Onwenu's dealing with an ankle injury.
Surgery that Reese reported. So I'm not going to say that Bill Murray is like, oh, all of a sudden I'm going to put him on my roster projection as a on the roster, but him and James Ferentz were kind of switching off a little bit on the inside there at guard, at right guard. So that was sort of your group. I think that group, it's safe to assume, maybe with Bill Murray being the one guy that could be on the fringe of it when things get real. And James Ferentz certainly has the practice squad element that is, I think, always going to be there, that he could be cut just to make room for somebody else on the 53 initially and then brought back or promoted from the practice squad. Right. But the two new guys, Reif and Calvin Anderson, I still think Connor McDermott has a shot. Trent Brown's going to have one of those spots.
We got to see what it looks like when Trent Brown comes back. Yeah. I think that's a big part of it.
But I think that they're really high on those two new guys, and that's why they're signed up. It's not like kind of not breaking ground by saying that. They signed them for a reason, but one of those guys, I think Connor McDermott or Riley Reif or Calvin Anderson, one of those guys is starting next year at one of the tackle spots. That's for sure.
Well, and I think some people had wondered, mostly with Reif, which side he was going to play on, because he'd been a left tackle for so long and then played right tackle the last couple of years. And that, to me, is the biggest thing to come from all this, is we kind of get an idea of who's going to play on which side, at least primarily.
It does seem like they're getting Reif ready to play right tackle.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be what we all expected and where it's headed. Moving over to the other side of the football, defensive line. Again, not a position that I'm going to get too crazy about what actually happened in a non-padded practice. But Keon White. Keon White's a thing. Keon White's involved, playing a little bit with his hand in the dirt, playing a little bit standing up, playing over the tackle, outside the tackle some. Just looks like that's a guy that they're trying to get ready as well. Some people, I think, had some opinions on how he looked, like rushing and stuff. Again, I'm not going to really look too much into any of that, but I think what was interesting, a lot of their base front, the team drills that they did with defensive linemen and had base front, it was that tilt front that I was talking to you about, the odd front, the 3-4, with a stand-up outside linebacker on the line of scrimmage, and that was mostly Josh Uche, it seemed like, but Keon White also mixed into that role a little bit. I could see that being his role at some point as well. So I'm not surprised. Like, Keon White's a 25-year-old rookie, right? 24, 25-year-old rookie, something like that. He's in college for 6 years. I don't think that he's one of those guys that should be brought along slowly necessarily. I think he should be ready to contribute year one, especially when you drafted him in the second round. So I'm not shocked that he was out there already by any means. So I'm not really, I don't know. Some people are really excited about that. I don't know. I kind of think that he's going to play a role no matter what.
No, that's something I will put stock into. And look, I get they were down Lawrence Guy, Devon Godshaw, Christian Barmore, Matthew Judon, but like, there's other guys I think that they could have rotated the reps more evenly, is my point. We didn't see as much of a guy like Ronnie Perkins. We didn't see as much.
And I think that's a good thing, right? Because
it's
there's
great.
no reason, and I'm not.
We've seen them be hesitant with rookies in the past.
There's no reason to waste time with Judon not being here, with those other guys that you mentioned, but mostly Judon not being here. There's clearly another a hole next to Uche on the other side.
I think with Lawrence Guy, there could be some upside in Lawrence Guy, some crossover in the role Lawrence Guy plays to Keon White.
Yeah,
too,
potentially. Some 5 technique.
And then honestly, to extrapolate that out, we're talking about, hey, look, they're giving the rookies a shot. This is great. Marte Mapu.
That was so. You told me not to overreact.
We can overreact to this one. This is the one I will allow you to overreact to.
I'm all in. I said it on PU. I'm going to say it here. I really, really think that there's reason to be extremely excited about the feeling, the vibe right now around Marty Mapu. Not the main reason, 90% of where I'm coming from is the fact that he was out there, very, very first rep of 7-on-7 of the entire practice. They send their quote-unquote starting defense out there. And who's at the second level of the defense? Jawan Bentley. And is it Marty or Marte? We need to get these names right. It's wrong.
Well, look, even if it's Marte Mapu, Marty's like a nickname, right?
Regardless, Jawan Bentley, Marty Mapu, the first 2 linebackers on the field for the Patriots, even with Marty Mapu in the red non-contact jersey as he recovers from the pec, which tells you that even if it's just mental reps, they want him taking the mental reps. I'm excited.
Which is massive.
I'm excited because this is exactly the role that I wanted him to play. I wanted them to play him at linebacker, right? We had this whole minutia argument of is he a safety? Is he a linebacker? Is he both? Like, he was a linebacker yesterday. He's playing at the second level next to Jawan Bentley at inside linebacker, weak side linebacker. That's exactly where he should be. He's out there with other starters, with other ones, whatever you want to call it. And I think the other thing that really got me excited, this really made me tingle a little bit. He moved pretty damn well out there. He was moving really well in space, in coverage. And I think the biggest thing is watching him in the passing game, like, read out plays and, like, diagnose coverage, route combinations was really impressive. Like, you can see the eye discipline, right? Like, where he's going here, ball, right? Like, you can see sort of the way that his headgear is moving, and you can tell that he's thinking about, okay, this guy's clearing this out, they're filling it in here, like, here's where I'm at, right? Like, you can tell the process is down, and then he's got some real click and close too. And once he's able to hit people, I think it's going to be a difference. The one, like, little bit of throwing water on my fire over here just a little bit is that this is like sub-package territory, right? We're not doing run game. We're not 11 on 11. There's no pads. There's no contact. So it could just be that they view him in year one as a sub-package, sub-linebacker, a coverage linebacker, whatever you want to call it. But even that, I think, is just really exciting to see. There was some plays where it was like they were trying to high-low him or clear him out, and he just didn't take the cheese. He was positionally sound. He was sifting through route combinations and different threats, and then he was finding the football. A really exciting mental practice from him as well. And I'm not like talking about physical stuff quite yet in terms of like closing on the ball and tackling and things like we're not there yet. But mentally, you could tell that he understood his assignment. Like he wasn't floating. He wasn't lost in space. He wasn't covering grass. Like, he was really on top of his P's and Q's.
Yeah, he was excellent. And again, just the fact they put him out there, we know they'll redshirt a guy. We know they'll wait and put a guy in NFI if they can, and they had every reason to do with him, but they put him right out there on the field. That tells me they have big plans in store for him this year. Yeah,
it's a good point about the NFI or, whatever injury list they want.
Yeah.
A guy that tears his pec in February that you draft, like Cameron Grown. We just didn't see him. Andrew Stuber, we just didn't see him, right? That's not the case with Marty Mapu, and it's exciting because this is the type of player that we've been clamoring for. This is the type of player that you want out there, that you want to see in this day and age. It's Matt Milano, it's Deion Jones, it's a 225-pound true linebacker. We're not talking about a safety. We're talking about a linebacker, and it was exciting to see with Mapu. Okay, moving back, secondary. No Christian Gonzalez. I know you were a little bummed about this. I was a little bit bummed about it. No Christian Gonzalez. We don't really have word yet about why we did not see Christian Gonzalez, but he wasn't out there yesterday's practice. But that did leave the door open, I guess, a little bit. I don't know if he would have been out with the ones anyways, but Jack Jones in the mix. And next to Jonathan Jones on the outside, Miles Bryant. Marcus Jones was limited, so we didn't see a ton of him. Miles Bryant's still playing the slot for now, playing some safety as well with Miles, too, as you would expect. But I'm optimistic that this Jack Jones thing now a little bit more than I was, let's say, even 48 hours ago, right? Because I was really concerned that they were just going to bury him
Right.
after how it ended for him last year with the suspension and everything. Maybe it was just because they needed to, because they didn't have bodies, right? Like maybe it was that whole thing. But at least they had him out there and he was playing.
Yeah, look, it's tough to say without Gonzalez because I think Gonzalez is such a big piece of this. And even if as we get into the safety conversation, I think not having Gonzalez out there impacts that because John Jones is a guy we think could get some reps deep. So it's a little hard to gauge. It's a little hard to gauge where they're at right now in the secondary. But Jack Jones was out there, and that's definitely a positive.
Yeah, so speaking of the safeties, we saw Jalen Mills playing some safety. Jalen Mills is a safety. Like they've moved him to safety.
Yeah, he's not a corner anymore.
And I think this is another one that this could be a situation. And look, I know that we're being a little bit positive about everything here today, as we should in the spring. It really shouldn't be too negative. But with Jalen Mills, I am cautiously optimistic that maybe he's actually a better safety than he is a corner. I think that's certainly what he showed in Philadelphia. Once the Eagles finally moved him to more of a safety role, he's playing a little bit of deep safety. He was playing a little bit of closer to the line of scrimmage, but I think the general consensus with him at safety is that he's going to play some deep middle of the field, maybe some split safety coverages, and then maybe guard some tight ends. Like, I think that's going to be kind of a mix and match sort of role for him. But he was back there with Duggar and Phillips and Jabril Peppers. But it was nice to see some of you mentioned it earlier. They were already spinning the dial a little bit. Like, it wasn't, it wasn't too exotic, but they were already trying to change the picture a little bit on the quarterbacks and things like that. So there's a lot going on back there. I'm with you, though, that it's tough to really sink your teeth in and be super excited without Christian Gonzalez because we don't know exactly how all the puzzle pieces are going to fit together when he was out there. But what do you think in general of Mills moving to safety? I don't think we really can glean too much from yesterday, but just the fact that we now know that that's pretty much official, that he's going to be a safety.
Yeah, I still think he's more like a situational safety dealing with tight ends, things like that.
Yeah.
The one thing, if we're going to talk about the safeties, I was kind of surprised by yesterday. I think we expected to see Kyle Duggar get reps deep. I think we expected to see Jalen Mills get reps deep. Phillips and Peppers worked in there too, a good amount. And Peppers, I can kind of see it. So the thing is, I'm torn between I don't want to take Kyle Duggar out of the box because he's so good there.
Yeah.
But I also don't. He's probably the best deep safety they have on their roster just in terms of his skill set. So which way do you want to go? But if they can get something from Phillips or Peppers deep, that changes things. Peppers I kind of like back there because he's very instinctive, he's very explosive, and he's a good tackler. And those are three big traits on the back end. I don't know that he has the straight line speed to play back there full time, but when the other team crosses the 50 and you maybe don't have to worry about those true deep shots, it becomes a bit more realistic. Phillips, I always thought of as just a box safety, but he definitely has the intelligence to play on the back end, and he might, you talk about his football IQ, and this isn't to take anything away from other guys who've been here, but the communication element of it, right, that was so important with Devin McCourty. Phillips, I think, just based on what other players have talked about, how he is on the field, if you're looking to fill that communicator role, I actually think Adrian Phillips might be the best guy for that. So
yeah, I think they're definitely, if they're going to play split safety or cover two quarters coverage, like where half the field is, each player has half the field, then I think guys like Adrian Phillips and Jabril Peppers can factor into that. I just think the big question with those two guys,
we saw them in a little single high yesterday.
I don't know if they have the range to play single high. That's sort of where I'm going with that.
Well, I guess, so again, to what I'm saying.
Like Devin McCourty, guys that are like, and look, I'm not asking anybody to be an elite free safety, elite post safety, but guys that are truly elite at that spot have like legit speed.
But that's kind of my point. I don't think you're going to find a perfect replacement for Devin McCourty, so can you piecemeal it? maybe when the other team is 1st and 10 back at the 20, you're not going to put a guy like Jabril Peppers back there because he doesn't have the speed. But if they're at like, if they're at like the 35 going in, suddenly that's a lot less ground to cover, right? And maybe it becomes more realistic, and you can put more emphasis on a trait like IQ or tackling ability because the speed's still important, but there's not as much ground to cover.
Yeah, it also depends. Like if you're talking about him playing post safety, single high safety, in man to man, that's a lot different than him playing post safety in cover 3, right? Because cover 3, you're just you just got the middle of the field, and then their deep part of the field is protected by the outside corner, so it's a 3 across the top. Right. When you're playing single high safety in man, you are that's it.
That's it. Yeah, and that's where you probably need a guy like Kyle Duggar back there because of how fast he is. But again, I think there's spots where it might make more sense for one of those other guys. Look, they're trying it. I'm interested they're trying it. I'm glad they're trying it. I don't know that it will work to whatever extent.
And this is, sort of speaks to the things that even Devin McCourty has thrown out there, that this group, it might end up actually being, even though they're losing so much with Devin from a leadership standpoint and from that true center fielder experience, this might be a situation where they can mix and match a little bit more. You might not be as stagnant. You might not be as predictable on the back end because you're really not. Devin McCourty should play center field because he's Devin McCourty. Yeah. And in these packages, like, is it going to make a big difference if it's Kyle Duggar versus Adrian Phillips versus Jalen Mills versus Jabril Peppers? Or one of those guys so much better like Devin was in that role that it has to be Devin all the time? Like, probably not. So you're able to maybe mix and match it a little bit more, be a little bit more unpredictable, spin the dial a little bit. Like sometimes they spin it and it's Duggar going up top. Sometimes they spin it and it's Phillips going up top. And now it just it makes offenses react a little bit more. So I think that's part of the goal, is to be a little less predictable and maybe a little less, a little bit more positionless, and just kind of having that feel that either one of those guys can do it. Be a little bit more interchangeable. All right, last but not least, your specialists. We mentioned it a little bit.
Well, we kind of already did that.
No, honestly. I want to do a little bit more. You got your hang times. You got your. I know you were on the stopwatch.
I didn't get a chance to do the operation times. It's hard from that far away. I know. I failed. It's really hard to do from that far away.
You had one job to do.
I got the hang times. Everybody wanted the hang times.
So what was Behringer? I don't know which one we're gonna go with on this, but what was the top? I
trust Mike.
What was the top hang times here?
So hang on, let me pull them up. So Behringer definitely had the better overall hang times. I think Waitman was a little more consistent. I also think one of the drills, it looked like they were doing a short kick drill, so I don't feel great about these hang times being fully representative. But Waitman had 3.76, 4.4, 3.75, 4.78, 4.8, and 4.32. So he maxed out at 4.8. His minimum was 3.7. His average was probably about 4.4, 4.5. Behringer at 4.4, 5.25, 3.61, 5.28, 4.05.
2 5s?
Yeah, 2 5.25s and 1 5.28. Okay. 405 and 459.
Put him out.
So his average is probably a little higher. He was booming the ball. It was excellent. He was booming it.
So there's two things in my really unexpert opinion when it comes to punters. With Behringer, what I will say, one, you could hear that ball come off the foot, right? Like that, it makes that like pop. And that's right. I think there's something to be said for that. And the other thing is, he reminded me a ton, and it wasn't quite as impressive. Remember those first couple weeks of spring camp and things like that? Jake Bailey was just like kicking the crap out of the ball.
I remember hearing Matthew Slater at one point just yell, "Wow!" Yeah,
we weren't quite there with Behringer, but it was close. I think it was close, and I just remember Bailey in that camp being just super impressive, and I wasn't as bullish, but there were some punts certainly from Behringer. But the point being, in that practice, those practices for Bailey, there were some shanks.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to some of the guys about it, and they were just saying that that's the type, he was kind of that type of punter at the time, where it was, either all driver or you're shanking it into the woods, right? He
Right.
your golf references. And I still think that Behringer's kind of in that territory where the kid's got a leg. Like, there's no doubt about that. Is it going to be consistent? I still think that maybe that remains to be seen. Is that fair, would you say?
Yeah, I thought he looked I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. It was interesting too, so they were essentially doing 2 drills at once. They were doing punt block drills and return drills. So at times they had the punt formation lined up, and then the punter lined up like off to the side near the sideline.
Why people listen to the show.
And so they'd snap the ball to whoever was back there as the punter, and then he would essentially throw the ball up in the air like it was blocked, and the punter off on the sideline would punt it. So you're coming from a different angle. It's a little bit of a different operation that kind of changes things. Well, they did do some regular punts too, but if Behringer, a couple of his shorter kicks came off of that, where he was the punter off to the side, so it looks a little different. So we got to see him like full on, coming up.
And with Chad Ryland, I thought your analysis after the draft about him being like money from inside 50, and we'll see about 50 plus, seemed pretty accurate yesterday. Like it just seemed like he has a really nice control of the football. Like when he kicks it, he knows where it's going.
Yeah.
It's not like he kicks it and it's like off to the left. I think guys like Justin Rohrwass or Quinn Nordine, when we saw them kick, when they were on, but when they were off, it was like,
well, it's like you said with Bailey. They're all driver. They're trying to hit the ball as
Yeah.
hard as they can, and sometimes you lose control on that.
Yeah.
Ryland is kind of picking up where you left off with Nick Folk.
Yeah.
When you get 45, 50-yard field goal, you're going to maybe consider going for it, but you get inside 45 yards, you feel pretty good about what he's going to do. Like you feel like you're walking away with 3 points very, very consistently, which I think is how they approach the position. And to something you like to talk about, to apply this to offense, having that kind of kicker is generally a sign. And when they brought in Nick Folk, this was true. They're going to go for it more in that tweener range, because if you know you're going to go for it, right, from I'm blanking on the yard lines, but from like a 45 to a 55-yard field goal. After that, you're punting. But if you know you're going to go for it more in that range than punt, it makes all the sense in the world to get a kicker who prioritizes accuracy more than power, because you know you're not kicking it there. So fine, all right, he's automatic inside of 40, perfect. We don't really care what he can do beyond that. Whereas other teams may say, we want the option to kick field goals from further out. Now, the downside of that, and we saw this with Folk in the Bucs game in 2021.
When you need to win a game.
When you need 54 yards to win the game, you're kind of grinding your teeth a little bit. But I don't mind that they're planning on every game not coming down to a field goal.
That'd be nice.
This is kind of what they do. So I think this is a sign, among other things, to bring it to offense, because I have to make it relevant to people like you. They're gonna go for it more on fourth down this year.
So I do feel like, and then we can wrap because we've already talked way too much about the kickers on an OTA practice, but I do feel like they've always sort of leaned a little bit more into the accuracy kickers than the power kickers. Like Adam Vinatieri was an accuracy kicker, I would say, and Stephen Gostkowski, I would say, was maybe early on in Gostkowski's career he had a little bit more leg. But I don't remember either one of those guys being like a Sebastian Janikowski, like you're going to kick it from 60 yards.
You can have leg and still be more, like the great kickers can hit from 55 and they're super accurate, right? I think the only times they've really gone with a guy who prioritizes power to accuracy was Shane Graham for that half season, and then Rohrwasser. And I guess Nordine, but Nordine always felt like a project. I don't think they ever brought Nordine in to be the starting kicker. I think the idea was, let's just work with this kid, and if he can figure it out, great. If not, we get serious about finding the next kicker in a year or two, which is ultimately what
they did. And then Nick
did.
Folk, obviously, is an accuracy guy.
Nick Folk's an accuracy guy. Vinatieri is. Gostkowski is.
Yeah.
I would even say, who did they bring in before Folk? Remember, they brought a kicker in for like 2 or 3 weeks.
Why did I want to
it
say
wasn't
it was
Kai Forbath. They worked him out. No, you had a stupid nickname
Mike
for him.
Nugent.
Mike Nugent.
Nugent
the Nuge.
Hopkins.
You called him the Nuge. Mike Nugent was an accuracy kicker, too.
The Nuge.
That was a really bad nickname. That was a really stupid nickname.
Matt, that's a great nickname.
I think that's why he didn't work out here, is because you insisted on calling him the
Morrell
Nuge.
thinks it's a good nickname.
You can do anything with the the chant you got.
I guess.
If he was good, we would have been Nugent all over the place. It's great.
Yeah, I just can't really do that for Chad Ryland. We'll see. We'll come up with something.
Nugent all over the place is good. I don't know. That has some. Anyways.
Yeah. I was not a fan of that nickname.
I couldn't tell. So we'll be back out at practice next Tuesday, next OTA practice, and then we have mini camp the following week. So we get to see some football over the next couple weeks, which is great, and not actually just talk about it like it's, some Madden simulation, but we can actually talk about things that are going on and happening, and we'll obviously keep up with the news with DeAndre Hopkins and other things that are going on around the league. But all in all, that's a wrap on our first OTA recap. I think that what fans should really take away from this, and this is how I want to end this, what fans should really take away from this is the football team looked like a professional football team.
We got a football team, Evan.
And that's all that we can take away from spring practices on May 31st. But we'll be back next Thursday to recap our second look at the Patriots at OTAs next week. Patriots Unfiltered will be on right after OTAs next week. So if you want that instant reaction, you can do that. And you can wait for us on Thursday as well. But until then, signing off for Alex Barth, I'm Evan Lazar. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you for downloading this podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Google Play, and everywhere else you listen. Like the show? Please rate and review us. Listener comments and ratings help keep us high in the podcast rankings so new listeners can find us. Be sure to check patriots.com for more news and more podcasts.